So today we're going to pull back the curtain on a really common, really powerful drug, warfarin. We're going to dive into the nitty-gritty of how it actually stops a clot in its tracks. And really, it all boils down to this one big question. How can one little pill manage to interrupt one of the most vital, life-saving processes our body has? It's pretty amazing when you think about it. So let's get into the science. All right, here's our game plan. We're going to tackle this in 5 steps. First, we'll look at the body's natural clotting system, then the huge role of vitamin K. After that, we'll bring in warfarin, our disruptor. We'll zero in on the exact enzymes it messes with, and finally, we'll talk about what this all means for someone actually taking the drug. Okay, first up, the body's clotting cascade. You can think of this as your body's own incredible built-in first aid kit. It's this natural defense system that just springs into action the second you get a cut. It's basically a perfect chain reaction, right? So first, an injury sends out this emergency signal. That signal kicks off a whole cascade of enzymes, these things called clotting factors, that switch on one after the other, just like a line of dominoes tipping over. And what's the end result? A tough, kind of mesh-like clot that seals up the wound and stops you from bleeding. Pretty clever. Now, inside that whole cascade, there are a few key players you really need to know about. Factors 2, 7, 9, and X. They're kind of the stars of the show. And here is the absolute kicker. For any of these guys to even get made in the first place, they all rely on one essential ingredient, and that's vitamin K. And that, of course, brings us to our next piece of the puzzle, vitamin K itself. You should really think of it as the key activator. It's not just some simple vitamin. It's more like a master craftsman, getting all these clotting factors ready for the big job. So, how does it do it? Well, it uses this chemical process called carboxylation. Now, that sounds complicated, but all it really means is that vitamin K helps stick a special little chemical tag, a carboxyl group, onto those clotting factors. And this is the magic step. This little tag acts like a tiny chemical hand, letting the factors grab onto calcium so they can build the clot. Without that tag, they're basically useless. Okay, so now that we've set the stage, let's bring in our main character, warfarin, the great disruptor. It's like a perfectly aimed wrench thrown right into the gears of this incredibly fine-tuned machine. Now, here's something you really have to get about how warfarin works. It doesn't just go in and destroy the clotting factors that are already floating around in your blood. No, it's way more clever than that. It plays the long game. It stops your liver from making new, working clotting factors to replace the ones that get used up. So how in the world does it actually do that? Well, to understand, we've got to zoom way in, right to the heart of the mechanism. It's really a story about 2 very important enzymes. This is where the real action is. You see, our bodies are super efficient. We don't like to waste anything. So we have this amazing vitamin K recycling system. Step 1, active vitamin K is used to put that little tag on the clotting factors. But in doing that, the vitamin K gets used up. It turns into something called vitamin K epoxide. But no worries. Step 3, our body has this special enzyme that swoops in and recycles that used up vitamin K right back into its active form, ready to go again. And that heroic recycling enzyme, it has a name. Vitamin K epoxide reductase. You're going to want to remember that name because that enzyme is the single solitary target for warfarin. And boom, there it is, the climax of our whole story. Warfarin's entire job is to block vitamin K epoxide reductase. It literally shuts down the recycling plant. That means the used-up vitamin K just gets stuck. The supply of active, ready-to-go vitamin K just tanks. And without it, the liver simply can't do that critical job of activating new clotting factors. The result is a pretty stark contrast. You can see it here. Before warfarin, you've got these fully functional clotting factors. They have those little chemical hands, and they're all set to grab calcium and form clots. But after warfarin, well, the liver is still pumping out the protein part of the factors, but they're deads. They're dysfunctional. They're missing those crucial little hands, so they can't grab calcium and they can't form a clot. Simple as that. Okay, so let's zoom back out from the molecular level and connect this to the real world. What does all this fancy science actually mean for a person who's taking warfarin every day? Well, for one thing, it perfectly explains why the drug takes a while to kick in. You don't feel the peak effects for about 72 to 96 hours. And why is that? It's because your body first has to get rid of all the working clotting factors it already had floating around. Remember, warfarin doesn't destroy the old ones, it just stops you from making new ones. And because that effect has to be balanced on a knife's edge, not too much, not too little, it needs some really careful monitoring. That's where this blood test called the INR comes in. It stands for International Normalized Ratio, and the whole goal is to keep that number in a very specific sweet spot, usually somewhere between 2.0 and 3.0. All right, let's wrap this all up into a neat little package. Here's Warfarin at a glance. Its whole mechanism? It blocks that key recycling enzyme, vitamin K epoxide reductase, which in turn blocks the synthesis of factors I, V, I, X, and X. The onset? We know that's slow, taking a few days. Monitoring? Yep, you need those regular INR blood tests. And the antidote? Well, it's exactly what you'd guess. You just give the patient a dose of vitamin K, replacing what the drug is stopping the body from recycling. And all of this leaves us with one last, kind of fascinating question to chew on. This incredibly elegant mechanism was figured out decades ago. So in today's world, with all these brand new, cutting-edge drugs, what is it about this old-school disruptor that keeps it so incredibly relevant and widely used in medicine?